Once again, aloha and good morning to all panelists and participants. We have many attendees today, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here. Welcome to the 2020 Hawaii Bioeconomy Trade Organization Forum. This is the fourth forum that we've had, and as an organization, this is the second. We've been performing these sorts of forums and putting these together with local legislators for the past 4 or 5 years. And we're excited for the opportunity for this New World Zoom situation. So the pandemic's the challenges to Hawaii really are many, but they're also an opportunity. One of the questions that we're asking is, what can we do to increase sustainability in the recovery? What can we do to come out of this stronger? And similar to the Build Back Better, what can we do to step up from where we are today? Next slide, please. The Hawaii Bioeconomy Trade Organization is made up of multiple local businesses and organizations, such as Par Hawaii, Hawaii Gas, IES, Pacific Biodiesel, PVT Land, Simone Pietra Enterprises, as well as KPLP, and one of our Innovation Council members, CH4 Ag. We appreciate everyone's support and participation, and our membership is strong and very vibrant. We actually welcome everyone to join us in our membership. Next slide, please. The HBeTO mission is dedicated to the advancement of integrated biologically based systems, which produce products and services to reuse waste, make renewable fuel, local food, and value-added products throughout Hawaii. The slide we have here shows just some examples of what is happening and how we are integrated within the state in many, many ways. Next slide, please. Our vision statement is lengthy. I'm not going to read all of it, but our intention is to provide a forum and make sure that the industry has a seat at the table as we discuss sustainability, locally produced fuel, food, feedstock, consumer goods, and so forth. We are endeavoring to create beneficial collaborations across all sectors. We want to make sure that there's opportunities for construction and proactive paths for green fuels. One of the things that we do is operate on, yes, with projects, but yes, we reach out to people, but then we also engage with policy. It's what I refer to as our 3 Ps. And we do engage with our local legislators with policy. There have been multiple pieces of legislation throughout the years that have come out, including the Green Fuels Initiative resolution that passed a few years ago. So we do try to engage to try to spur the opportunities and build the economy and really build the bioeconomy as much as can be with as many partners as is available to us. Next slide. So the current state of affairs that we have is that we live and exist in a linear economy. The take, make, waste. We import materials and products, we use them, we consume them, and they end up in landfills in large part. There's not a significant amount of recycling, but there is some. Our function, our goals are to try to convert and become more of a circular economy in a future state. And what we're trying to do as an organization and with all of our partners, what we can do to achieve these goals, move from a linear to a circular state to meet society's needs as well, but how we can really better accommodate and become more resilient and sustainable here in Hawaii. Next slide, please. As you can see here, this is our new logo and an infographic. And what is fabulous about this is we have the how flower in the middle, and we can see how all of the petals lead out to the various aspects and what are our 5 pillars as we approach circular economy. And those 5 pillars are agriculture, waste, renewable fuels, value-added products and services, and transportation. And these are vital and important, and these make up not just our membership, but they make up really the multiple sectors that lead towards renewable fuels as well as more of a sustainable economy within the bioeconomy. Next slide, please. So based on our 5 pillars, we have calls to action. what we're trying to achieve and what we need your help with is to help us achieve the promise of doubling local food production, to commit to a comprehensive renewable fuel standard and focus on development and completion of renewable fuel projects. From the waste side, we're looking for waste to fuels as well as zero waste repurposing. Multiple projects are underway. We'll hear about some of those today. Transportation side, we have fuel infrastructure and various needs. Certainly one of our members a couple of our members are related within there as well. And then one of the important points to make is building the bioeconomy brings high quality, higher paying, innovative jobs as well. And through that, we're doing value-added products, market innovation, and so forth. So these are our calls to action as we reach out to various sectors, various partners as we try to collaborate and reach forward for the state of Hawaii with our goals and with our missions. We want to make sure that we're creating jobs and market innovations and finding ways to produce and develop this. And once again, we ask all of you, and we're trying to advance our HBeTO membership. So please become a member. There are various ways of becoming a member. Ask us about that. You can contact us directly, and we can help you with that as well. Next slide. So what we want to be able to do is have metrics. We think that it's important that not just that we have these meetings and we have conversations and we go out into the legislature, but we want to make sure that we have measurable opportunities, that we can take a look at what we are doing and how we can see what our successes are and where we need more improvement, more opportunities. And that's what these set of slides indicates. Next slide, please. Specifically, what we can see here is the transportation greenhouse gas intensity benchmarks. What's important here is the greenhouse gas intensity. If we try to look at the grams of carbon per megajoule, it's an effective comparative measure. We can go across multiple sectors and multiple energy sources and come up with the same measurement so we can do a greater comparative measure of what is happening and where we are in our progress. And what we can see from this slide is an enormous opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas intensity in both utilities and transportation fuels. So what we can see here is take a look at the biodiesel in Hawaii and the renewable jet in California and compare that directly to the petroleum jet of the United Nations there, as well as California petroleum. You can see that there's a different intensity. And these are opportunities because as we're trying to look at the growth in these areas, we can see from charts such as this how this compares, a comparative in each sector. And most importantly, and most as it's striking, you can see the electricity in Hawaii. That intensity bar is very high, and that's significantly one of the areas that we can try to find ways to have an impact. Next slide, please. From our Hawaii food supply, there's been historical challenges here. Most recently, according to DBET from 2012, 85 to 90%, and sometimes higher in some statistics have shown that we have imported that much food. 80 to 90%, I've seen 92 to 95% imported food that we consume here in Hawaii. In 2014, Governor Ige was elected, and one of his commitments was to double local food production by 2020. Well, it's 2020. And what's interesting is, according to the current available data from 2017 by HDOA, it seems as though we've achieved that goal. However, it's not clear where that really falls with regard to the bioeconomy and our industries. So one of the questions I have is there more food waste available for our uses that we can convert into fuels and other means? Or what we have done, what our analysis has shown, as we look at multiple areas, is the data sets are inconsistent. So we think that more time can and perhaps should be spent on pulling together all of these metrics and all of this data to make sure that we truly understand. So if this is indicating a 29% local production, okay, well that was one data set from one organization. Others have different numbers, and so it's something, an area to work on. So next slide, please. So interesting here is the Hawaii solid waste. This is from 2019, and this is measured in tons. We can see immediately the enormous opportunity for growth in both waste to energy and waste to fuel. 50% of our solid waste is just disposed of in landfills. That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity that we can take. We see that energy recovery from H-Power and recycled we see that there's 50% there. Okay, that's great, but there's significant growth, and that's what we're looking forward to, and that's one of our calls to action. How can we take on some more of the solid waste and waste in other areas, green waste, and make something productive out of it? Next slide. From a wastewater perspective, we can see here is there's this, again, a significant opportunity for growth based on the percentile of wastewater available for both reused and repurposed. You can see the black lines here. You can see what the state has been doing, and there has been some improvement. We see as we go from 94 to 2001 and 2002, there's significant improvement in that area, but it's pretty much flatlined since then, and recently maybe it really needs some work. So I think that there's some room for innovation, room for opportunity within this area, what we can do and how we can reutilize this for greater projects in order to increase our sustainability as well. Next slide, please. So our members, the Hawaii Bioeconomy Trade Organization members, have made a commitment, and that commitment is to promote a vision of sustainable integrated bioeconomy in Hawaii, to pursue ideas and innovations from agricultural sectors, to convert waste from challenge to opportunity, to usable products such as renewable fuels as well as other value-added products, and to demonstrate innovative results through metrics and our projects as we achieve. So many of the pictures that we have actually come from our members as well. So there's a CH4 Ag, a project out by Castle High School. So again, we thank and appreciate them for their actions. Next slide, please. So how do we align our actions, our call to actions, and our vision and our actions from a company? How do we do that? We multifaceted organization. We have businesses from a couple of different sectors all coming together. Not everybody aligns on everything, but how? How do we come together? And this is our call to you as well, our challenge to you as well. How do you join us in our vision and in our actions? And there are 4 questions that we ask. Number 1, does it move us forward relative to the bioeconomy metrics that we were previously talking about? Does it support sustainability and a circular economy towards our goals and our missions? Does it reduce waste and or greenhouse gas emissions, referring to our projects and statewide opportunities? And does it advance the state of Hawaii renewable goals? This is what we try to get aligned up on, and this is where each of our companies and each of our organizations come together, and we create that Venn diagram where we figure out exactly how we can be together and support and make sure that we can advance our goals and our objectives. Next slide, please. So once again, I would like to thank everyone, all of our participants and all of our attendees, and I welcome all questions. There will be question and answer sessions after each of our sessions. So I encourage everyone to be involved and engaged. I see that there's already a couple of questions here or there. We appreciate those. They will be gotten to as we proceed. From here, we'll be moving on. I believe there'll be some comments from Joelle Simone-Pietri, who is the chair of our board of directors. And then from there, we'll move on to our first session with our keynote speaker, John Heimlich. So Joelle, I hand over to you.
Thanks, Carl. And thanks very much for the introduction. I think we should actually just head straight into it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Heimlich, one of our keynote speakers, and his colleague, Nancy Young, to go ahead and talk to us about the commercial aviation point of view. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Joelle. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. I'll start my portion and we'll turn it over to Nancy. We represent 7 U.S. passenger airlines, 3 U.S. cargo airlines, and Air Canada. And we've been around since 1936, and environmental commitments and proficient energy use is very much part of our platform. We were a large footprint U.S. airlines operating around the world in 2019 pre-pandemic, 750,000 employees, 28,000 flights a day carrying 2.5 million passengers to and from 80 countries, and 58,000 tons of cargo per day to and from 220 countries. Let's just get right to the bottom line. The bottom line is bad financially. We are estimated to lose on a pre-tax basis $44 billion this year. Through the first 3 quarters, we've lost $36 billion, and losses will continue in 2021, and we expect to be profitable in 2022, all else equal. We always have downturns in our industry at some point or another, never this profound. This is the most severe crisis in aviation history. Importantly here, you see that the losses from the next 3 years will exceed the gains from the past 3. So how quickly our fortunes can be wiped out, and hence we have fewer people, fewer routes, fewer flights, fewer aircraft. So we're going to get a lull for a while in fuel consumption, which I'll speak to in a moment. Relative to 2019 levels in terms of passenger volume, we expect our best case scenario is that in 2024, we'll be back actually slightly above 2019 levels. In our pessimistic case, we are 10% below, but we do not expect passenger volumes, let alone high quality traffic or revenues, to be back to where we are before 2024. This is a long recovery for us. So to cope with that difficult environment, we're borrowing lots and lots of money. We expect to be up 66% from the end of last year to the end of this year in debt. And that's going to mean the next several years, we're going to have more than $4 billion annually in interest expense. And the more we spend on repaying and servicing our debt, the less we're spending on alternative fuels, on aircraft, on airport projects, and on our people. We look at demand here, you can see that this is September, year over year. Hawaii, the number of TSA screenings at Hawaiian airports was down 91% year over year, worst in the country. Best in the country was Wyoming, down 40.1%. So your best state is down 40%. These Hawaii and some of these Northeast states were rife with quarantine restrictions, which certainly didn't help. Virgin Islands doing a little better. If we move to the, I do have data from the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, which shows how policy levers can make a difference. The quarantine, of course, for out-of-state arrivals was instituted March 26th, and it was relaxed under certain conditions on October 15th, whereby travelers who tested negative within 72 hours of departure to the islands could be exempted from the quarantine, which is absolutely critical. Many people, not only can they not be able to stay away from home 14 days, but they can't afford 14 days in a hotel or purchasing food out of their kitchens. So we see this as you see the inflection. There is clearly pent-up demand, although it was still down more than 80% year over year, but that's better than 95% year over year. And we like to see this model replicated in other states and on key international markets. And our association and our member carriers are going to be pushing heavily for that. We just briefed the U.S. Secretary of Commerce on this plan accordingly this morning, and United Airlines just announced they're going to do free testing in Newark, London 3 times a week for some time. International, just devastated. So again, places with strict quarantines, Canada and UK were our top 2 international country pairs with the United States last year, 2.7 million passengers in September last year, and 2 million respectively. Mexico was number 3. This year, Canada and UK are both down about 95%. So in Canada went from 2.7 million to 97,000. The New York, London market specifically went from 415,000 down to 21,000. Devastating. Both have 14-day quarantines. Mexico has no quarantine, 1.9 million, and cut in about half this year, doing much better. So look at what's ahead. Mexico and Dominican Republic. These are markets that don't have restrictions, that are more leisure and visiting friends and relatives oriented than business. So therefore, with fewer people flying and less overall cargo, the pandemic means fewer aircraft employed. We had, at the end of last year, 5,856 active aircraft, another 300 in storage. And now we're down to 4,423 active aircraft, with 1,733 either in temporary or long-term storage or permanently retired. In fact, 25% of the US passenger airline fleet has been inactive for at least 30 days. What does that mean for fuel demand? Now, this is an EIA, Energy Information Administration lens, which means it includes US and foreign airlines lifting on US soil, recreational and business jets, and civilian, government, and military use. So it's very comprehensive. And clearly gasoline and diesel, relative to their 2019 levels, have recovered much more quickly. In fact, diesel has now overtaken gasoline on that basis. Gasoline was the first people wanted to get away from their homes. Some people started returning to work, and they felt safer in their cars. And many took long road trips that they wouldn't have taken in the past. Jet is still about 60% below its year ago levels, a much slower and non-linear recovery. If you look at EIA annual data for jet, it's million barrels per day, or actually this is 1,000 barrels per day. So look at 2000, 1.725 million barrels a day. We did not get back to that level until 2019. 19 years to actually get back and then exceed the level. So remember, 2000, we had 9/11, we had Hurricane Katrina and the subsequent oil spikes, and we had the Great Recession with reducing demand, and then 4 years of $100 oil and a major contraction by our industry. And it was not till 2019 that we got back. And suddenly here we are at an estimate for 2020. We went from an all-time high to, I'm not even sure the last time, I don't have it handy, that we were this close to just 1.1 million barrels a day. So it's going to take us a while, not just in terms of obviously the passenger demand and cargo demand to climb back, but the fuel demand be a while, which gives us some breathing room to think a little harder about what kind of fuel that will look like. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Nancy Young, our Vice President of Environmental Affairs. Nancy?
Well, thank you, John. And you may wonder, like, we're focusing on the bioeconomy, so why are we giving you the difficult news about the industry? I think, if I have something to add here, it is that we want to build back better, like all the industries, and sustainable aviation fuels are a big part of our climate commitment in doing that. Next slide. So, and John's moving the slides for me, so. So with that tremendous amount of economic activity that John showed, at the same time, we were a relatively small climate change contributor, accounting for, in the United States, US airlines, 2% of the nation's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and globally, all airlines accounting for 2% of the world's inventory. We had a very strong record because we're very driven to be fuel efficient, and with fuel directly equating to carbon dioxide emissions, we had an 135% fuel efficiency improvement since '78, saving a lot of CO2. At the same time, you may recall at the end of 2019, early 2020, there was a lot of focus on what's called a flight shaming movement, concern about the potential for aviation emissions to grow and the relative portion of it that would be, if you took a flight, that's a big portion of your own profile. And so we have long had commitments to addressing that, to keeping our emissions down and reducing them over time. Next slide, please, John. So those targets that we set all the way back in 2009, our board, the US Airlines Board, but also the board of the international airlines at the International Air Transport Association, in the middle of this crisis, reaffirmed that we are sticking with our climate goals. And we had a fuel efficiency goal through 2020. Obviously, we're moving past that now in 2020. So our second goal is to achieve carbon neutral growth, and then a trajectory for a 50% net reduction in carbon emissions in 2050 relative to 2005 levels. Now, as John said, we've got depressed flying right now, but we want to get back to a growth profile. And so to meet these goals, we need to continue to drive technology, operations, infrastructure, and sustainable aviation fuels. And we need an international regulatory regime, which we have helped support at the United Nations body that sets standards for aircraft that fly all over the world. And that is in 2016, they agreed to an aircraft carbon dioxide standard, and in addition, a carbon offsetting reduction scheme for international aviation. To the extent that international aviation emissions grow above a baseline level, they would have to be offset. Importantly, that program allows for sustainable aviation fuel to be one of the accredited entries in that regime. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about sustainable aviation fuel. What is it? It is a non-petroleum fuel, and it fits really into this bioenergy discussion you all are having today. It's a non-petroleum fuel proven to be safe, and that's most critical for us, with reduced carbon emissions benefits, but also other environment and sustainability benefits. And you may have heard of it referred to as different things like biojet, alternative jet fuel, all the same thing. We just really, as an industry, have struck on sustainable aviation fuel as the right term for us. Now, in addition to carbon emissions that I'm really going to focus on, it does bring additional benefits like reducing particulate matter, which is a local air quality concern, brings sustainability to the industry more broadly, and for our industry, a chance to expand our product portfolio so that we have more energy security. And we understand that can also be significant for Hawaii as a very energy dependent state. Being able to grow your own fuels is a nice way forward. Next slide, please. So what we need to deploy sustainable aviation fuel is safety, environmental benefit, and commercial viability. And we've achieved the first two. Safety, we drove the fuel producers to be able to produce their fuel meeting our jet fuel specification and established significant quality assurance requirements in the supply chain. On the environmental side, we established rigorous life cycle greenhouse gas emissions methodologies that have now been agreed at the international level as well. And in fact, you can get up to an 80% greenhouse gas emissions benefit with these fuels. We also have a sustainability review and certification process that ensures we're not creating other problems and hopefully having synergistic benefits. But the commercial viability side is the long tent in the pole, as they will say. We've had some successes, but we still need scale up. And this is where coming back from COVID-19, getting that policy balance right can really help. Next slide, John. So what's needed for commercial viability? You have to have an industry that's working with government and across industry, both the airlines, the aircraft manufacturers, and the fuel providers to make this happen. And we have that through a number of organizations like our Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative, the Continuous Lower Energy Emissions and Noise Program with the Federal Aviation Administration, and also with Federal FAA, Environmental Protection Agency, Transport Canada, NASA, and the Aviation Sustainability Center, which has 19 universities doing cutting edge research on sustainable aviation fuels and other means for reducing aircraft emissions and noise. So we also need to send market signals. Do airlines want this stuff? And I'm really pleased to note that 4 of A4A's members currently are taking sustainable aviation fuel supply. They're all in California, where there are incentives for that to be done. And that's part of our push here to get that kind of opportunity in Hawaii. And also a number of our members have agreements with prospective producers that are building their facilities right now. But what we continue to need at the federal level and also at the state level are consistent and sustained policies and scaling up that supply relative to petroleum jet fuel and relative to renewable diesel. We don't want to compete with those things. We want to have an additional fuel here. And the ability to have regionally available feedstocks, such as those unique to Hawaii, would be very helpful. Next slide. So what we made progress, but we still have this challenge of sustainable aviation fuel being expensive, needing more supportive programs. We are focusing on what types of tax incentives we can get at the federal level. And we're also focusing, particularly in a COVID and post-COVID environment, on positive incentives and public-private opportunities rather than mandates that could just further drag down the industry. Next slide, please, John. So examples of things in Hawaii that could really help make sustainable aviation fuel a reality. Really pleased with the work that the University of Hawaii has been doing in the Aviation Sustainability Center. They're one of those universities working on the supply chain assessment for sustainable aviation fuel, and they're focusing very specifically on what's available in Hawaii. So that's a good thing to leverage. Also, we want to continue to pair state programs with federal programs. At the federal level, there is a federal renewable fuel standard, and it allows sustainable aviation fuel to get credit on an opt-in basis, not a mandate, but an opt-in basis. And that's something that we like to expand to the different states that decide to adopt those types of policies. California and Oregon already have low carbon fuel standards, and I heard from Carl at the beginning that that's a goal of this bioenergy group. And to the extent Hawaii does that, we would like sustainable aviation fuel to opt in. Also, we were very pleased to see the legislature considering last year, or it's still this year, but the session is over, House Bill 1910, which would establish a sustainable aviation fuel program in Hawaii to support Hawaiian development. One last point on this, the feedstocks in Hawaii, everybody can think about that as a challenge. But again, to the bioeconomy initiatives that have been introduced today, municipal solid waste, construction waste, crop residue, waste oils and fats, carbon capture from industrial emitters. The circular economy can fuel sustainable aviation fuel. Next slide. So why SAF? I'll just end with this point essentially, which is we think there's a strong case for it. As Carl mentioned at the beginning, you can really move jobs with green energy. Also, as John mentioned, aviation is critical to the global, national, regional economies, and we know how important it is to Hawaii. And as noted, sustainable aviation fuel brings synergistic benefits. We are, as aviation, for commercial flights, going to rely on liquid fuel for some time. So really focusing there is where we think policy should go. And also, we're working together and are committed to make this happen. Last slide, John. And so, in sum, we're working together, we're committed, we're coordinating, and we see the opportunity in Hawaii, but we want to use this time to build back better, to have complementary, stable federal and state policy. And with that, I'll close out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'd also like to, without much further ado, to go ahead and cue in Eric Wright for the fuel industry view of COVID and its impact and how bioeconomy has been affected by that. So Eric, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Joelle. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, super.
That's great.
All right, give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Wright. I'm Senior Vice President with PAR Hawaii. We are Hawaii's local fuel producer. I need to start with this disclaimer. We're a public company, and so my presentation may contain forward-looking statements, and I can guarantee you that our actual results will vary from those. So with that out of the way, my goal today is to leave you with a better understanding of how fuel is produced and distributed in the state of Hawaii. I'll also talk a little bit about COVID and its impact on fuel producers, and I'll close with some comments on the future of liquid fuels in Hawaii. First, what is refining? Well, we make the products that you use every day. We provide fuel to HBeTO, they're our largest customer, to keep the lights on. We supply gasoline to get you to work or to school. And we make the jet fuel that's used by airlines and the military here in Hawaii. Where do we produce this fuel? Well, we have 2 facilities in Campbell Industrial Park, and you see those on the screen here. On the right is the facility that we call Par East. This is the former Tesoro refinery. And some of you may recall that it actually shut down in 2013 after Tesoro unsuccessfully tried to sell the facility. I was really proud of our company. We stepped in and restarted it with our team, and it's been doing pretty well since then. On the left side is what we call Par West. These are some refining assets that we bought from Island Energy Services at the end of 2018. It's the former Chevron refinery, and this facility is currently idle as a result of the impact of COVID on our business. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then finally, I just note these blue lines here are our pipeline systems. So the one at the bottom here goes out to our offshore mooring where we bring in crude, and this one at the top goes to Barbers Point Harbor, which is where we load barges for the neighbor islands. We have about 675 employees. Many of these are high-paying manufacturing jobs, union jobs at the refinery. And our parent company is called Par Pacific Holdings, publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. We have 2 sister refineries, one in Tacoma and one in Wyoming. And you're likely familiar with our fuel brands. We have the Hele and the 76 fuel brands. So how does a refinery produce fuel? Well, the first step is to bring in crude oil. And we bring in crude oil from all around the world. It comes to our buoy, which sits in about 100 feet of water, 2 miles off of Barbers Point. And you've probably seen it when you're approaching, when you're flying into Honolulu Airport. It's the yellow buoy out there. In simple terms, refineries boil crude oil in a distillation tower, and that allows us to separate the products into the crude oil into its components. And at the top of the tower, you have the lightest products that boil first. So those would be things like propane and naphtha, which is a gasoline precursor, and they boil off at the lowest temperatures. Next, you have what are called the middle distillates. So that is jet fuel and diesel, and they boil in the 315 to 650 degree range. And then at the bottom, you have literally the bottom of the barrel, which is often called the residual fuels, and they don't boil as easily. And this material is often put into downstream units where it's cracked using high pressure and high temperature, and it can be made into these higher value products like gasoline and jet fuel. And if you can't convert it, then you have to sell it as is, and that becomes fuel oil. So in Hawaii, that's for power generation and for marine applications, and it can also be used for asphalt. So a couple of observations about this process. First is refiners have some flexibility to change the mix of products they make. It's limited, and you do this in 2 different ways. One is the type of crude you buy. So in Hawaii, we buy a lot of crudes that are rich in jet fuel, given the jet fuel demand in Hawaii. The second way you do this is you can adjust the cut points. You can actually take sort of layers of these streams and move them into jet or diesel. So if you wanted to make less jet and more diesel, you would take the heaviest layer of your jet fuel stream and you'd put that into the diesel pool. The second observation I wanted to share is that this process requires a lot of heat. So we make some fuel and we burn about 3 to 4% of it in the process to produce other fuels. And so it may strike some of you as ironic, but we actually cheer for low oil prices, because when oil prices are high, that stream that we burn in the refining process becomes that much more expensive. what types of fuels are used in Hawaii? So this is a look at the market before COVID. The market demanded about 127,000 barrels per day. There's 42 gallons to a barrel of oil, so that's about 5.3 million gallons of fuel a day. 40% of this went into the jet market. So most of that is commercial jet demand, but the military also burns a lot of jet here in Hawaii. And before COVID, this had been growing for years. The next segment is utility fuels, and you won't be surprised to hear that this has been declining as HECO and KIUC put more solar onto the system. So this was a second biggest segment, but it is declining fairly rapidly. Gasoline's next. So despite the adoption of electric vehicles, still quite a lot of gasoline demand, and it had been relatively flat before COVID. One thing I note here is you can see the utility fuels and the high sulfur marine grades. Those tend to be the higher sulfur fuels. They're declining, and that is really driven by regulatory pressure at both the federal and the international level. That drove us in part to make an investment at the refinery. It was a first unit put in a Hawaii refinery in decades, called a hydrotreater, that allows us to make a cleaner burning diesel with less sulfur. And it also allows us to increase our jet production. So we don't just make the fuel, we also distribute it. So on the left side here, you can see this is a fuel barge. So a barge like this loads at Barbers Point Harbor and hits all the neighbor islands. So before COVID hit, our barge was very busy. It was essentially never idle and would visit all the islands about every 10 days to resupply them. On the right is our fuel terminal on Maui. So each of the islands has a facility that looks like this, receives fuel from the barge. And from here, you can see a truck down at the bottom. The fuel's loaded onto trucks and it goes to the airport for jet fuel or to the Hele station or the Costco or what have you. I'm now going to pivot and talk a little bit about COVID and the impact on the fuel business. So on the left side here, this chart really nicely summarizes what's happened. And this essentially covers January 2019 through May of 2020. And so you can see demand for this fuel just sort of rolling along, and then COVID hits, everybody stops flying and driving, gasoline took a big hit, jet fuel took a big hit, and less of a hit for diesel. So if you're a refiner, what do you do? Well, if you recall earlier when I talked about changing your mix of products, you tried to shift your production away from those fuels that are less in demand and into fuels that are more in demand. So you can see a pretty dramatic drop in jet fuel and motor gasoline yield and an increase in production in diesel fuel. So how did this turn out? Well, it hasn't turned out all that well for refiners. On the left side here is a chart of diesel inventories in the United States. And in the sort of grayish light blue area here is historical inventory levels over the past 5 years. And the red line is inventories this year. So you can see when COVID was starting, we were actually below the prior year's inventories and we shot up. And it's starting to come down a little bit now. So you don't have to be an economist to figure out what kind of impact this had on refiners' profitability. Simple supply and demand, the supply's rising greatly and demand's gone down. And so on the right, you can see what's happened. Refiners make money based on what's called the crack spread. So if you buy a barrel of crude oil for $50 and you can make diesel and sell it for $75, there's a $25 margin, and that's called the crack spread. And so that you can see that's about where the crack spread was in January, and today it's under $10 a barrel. So this has been a major issue across the entire refining sector. And this is, again, diesel, but I could put up charts of gasoline and jet fuel, and you'd see the exact same thing. So it's a pretty challenging environment. It's pretty amazing. We've seen some big companies announce refinery shutdowns, a couple of really sizable refineries in California. In some cases, these facilities are being retooled to produce renewable diesel and other products, but at a much smaller scale. So this is the Bioeconomy Forum, and I wanted to talk about the four main types of biofuels. Ethanol is the first one. It doesn't get a lot of attention these days, but has been blended into gasoline for over a decade in Hawaii, mostly driven by federal policy. Incidentally, ethanol has high octane. It's about 110 octane, so it helps refiners meet the gasoline spec for octane on gasoline. And we import ethanol from the mainland. Biodiesel, I know Bob King's going to be talking later, so he'll tell you more about this, but biodiesel is essentially fats, greases, or oils that are converted to a fuel through a chemical reaction that involves a catalyst and alcohol. And again, it's produced by Pacific Biodiesel here today, primarily goes into power generation on Oahu and Hawaii Island. And the capital costs to build a biodiesel plant are relatively low. The next category is renewable diesel. This is a very fast growing segment of the market. The refineries that are shutting down, many of them have announced a conversion to renewable diesel. Starts with the same feedstock as biodiesel, but it's put through a much more complex, really kind of a refining process that results in a fuel that's identical to petroleum diesel. And so it doesn't have to be segregated, and there's no limit to how much of it can be blended into diesel fuel. But the capital costs for these projects are very significant. You're talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And then finally, we've heard about sustainable aviation fuel, so I won't spend any time on that. A little bit on our view of the future for liquid fuels in Hawaii. HBeTO will continue to transition away from fuel oil and diesel. We're ready for that. We understand that. We'll position ourselves accordingly. There'll be a continuing role for biodiesel, particularly in power generation. Electric vehicles will continue to be embraced by the market, but we think the transition will be at a pretty measured pace, and there'll be demand for our products for years to come. And the same goes for traditional diesel. So as an energy company in Hawaii, what is our role in this process? Well, really, we're here to help. We're an energy company. We don't own crude oil. We don't drill for crude oil. To some extent, we're feedstock agnostic. We just want to be part of the conversation. We think we have a lot of knowledge and input that we can provide to policymakers as they pursue Hawaii's goals. And we'd like to participate in providing these fuels. I could see us co-feeding vegetable oil at our refinery potentially, or otherwise distributing renewable fuels to the market. So that's it for me. Mahalo for your time and allowing me to tell you a little bit about our business. Thanks very much.
Well, so I'm going to have the opportunity to moderate. We've got some great questions coming in from our attendees. So for Carl, Nancy, John, and Eric, thank you very much for your really informative presentations. Kind of going in order as we've been talking, you know, one of the things that you talked about, John and Nancy, is that COVID-19 is accelerating the retirement of older and less efficient aircraft. And so how do you think that's going to affect kind of like the global and also potentially for Hawaii fuel demand trends going forward? You know, like the goal was for carbon neutral growth starting this year, 2020. This year is going to be a very low base, but where do you see those trends from COVID affecting the plans going forward as far as demand?
Well, I'll start. I mean, definitely a lot less for a few years than they would have been otherwise. So you've got a couple factors, right? You've got just less flying, you know, fewer and less long haul flying in particular, because international will lag domestic. And then the other factor, and for a while we have less payload on the existing flights, so that's less burn. And because we have, you know, the kind of structural change in the fleet so quickly that we haven't seen, in well over a decade. We obviously, when airlines retire number of airplanes, they retire the least fuel efficient, least maintenance efficient first. And you're going to end up overnight with a much better average fuel efficiency than you would have otherwise. And as we're doing that, granted, we've had to defer some deliveries, but those deliveries that will come in are indeed, new production aircraft that are among the most fuel efficient in the world. So as those come in, not all the retirements that have been announced are completed. Some of them are over a 5-year period. So between the deliveries and the retirements and the lull in demand returning, we will see, I think, far lower emissions than we would have if not for the pandemic. And I think with that, maybe Nancy can add some color.
Yeah, I agree. But in the short run, we're not happy about the way that we're getting some of the emissions reduction we committed to, but that is where we are. And what we want to do, as I said before, when we get back to that growth trajectory that John was showing, sort of 2024 plus, we want to come back better. We have not forgotten our 2050 commitment. And that means we need to begin reductions, not just carbon neutral growth. And our 2050 commitment is relative to 2005 levels. So we really have work to do there. Also, the international program I mentioned, the carbon offsetting reduction scheme for international aviation, the baseline for carbon neutral growth there was set for the first 3 years now at 2019 levels, but it's expected to be revisited. So it's very possible that we will have a new carbon neutral growth baseline that's much more aggressive as we come out of this pandemic, and that will also drive climate action.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks, John. And so, and I think this one will probably start with Eric, but one of the questions was just about price and cost. Can you unpack a little bit for like a gallon of diesel, what some of the major cost drivers are for a gallon of diesel, say that, actually gets delivered to the island of Kauai, for example, yeah, over to you, Eric. So.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, the biggest driver is going to be the price of crude oil, right? We have to buy crude oil on the international market, bring it in, put it through our refinery. So there's a few dollars per barrel of costs, and you could look at our public filings. We disclose what that is. And then has to go through a pipeline, put on a barge. Barges are really expensive. Order of magnitude, you're talking $20,000+ per day. Take it over to Kauai and distribute it into a terminal. And then you have the trucking costs. So if a gallon of diesel fuel is $2 before tax, probably two-thirds to three-quarters of that would be on the crude oil purchase, and then the other portion would be on processing and distributing the fuel to the island.
All right, thank you, Eric. And then on the jet fuel side, we've got some questions, not just about sort of price and cost, but also how much SAF is actually in the market today, and so in the US as well as globally. And then what's happening with sustainable aviation fuel deals with COVID and all this disruption to the industry?
Yeah, I'll start. So we have been averaging before 2020 about 1 million gallons, a little over 1 million. Like some years it was 1.6, some years it was like just under 1 million for the last 4 or 5 years. That's not a lot compared to the US airlines using about 24 billion gallons of fuel. So we recognize that's not a lot. What is interesting is during the COVID period, we've actually had an uptick in both production and uplift. So we're looking at, we don't have year-end figures yet, but SAF production in the United States has gone up, and we're looking at about 5 million gallons this year compared to the ones or whatever, and I think that's really good news. I think part of that is because we have been building to this, and also because United Airlines extended its agreement with World Energy to take such fuel at LAX, and then Alaska Airlines, JetBlue, and American finalized their deal to take it at San Francisco. So I think that's good news. I think the US is probably the lead producer of sustainable aviation fuel. In fact, a number of European companies that use it use US fuel. So we have a long way to go, Joelle, to scale up. And that's why we're focusing so much on bringing more of the incentives that have been traditionally available for ground-based alternative fuels to the aviation market. And one of the questions I saw is like, what's the financial limit with it, SAF being so much more expensive? What I would say is it really depends on what deal you can put together. If you can leverage something like a renewable fuel standard at the federal level, the California Low Carbon Fuel Standard opt-in credit, and some other incentives, like we're working now on a potential sustainable aviation fuel blenders tax credit. Those could bridge that gap in the short run until we can get the scale up that we need.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. And so, Carl, to sort of bring it all together with the bioeconomy vision and what Nancy and John have been talking about for aviation, and Eric, for fuel distribution in Hawaii. Tee up for us a little bit, what we're going to be talking about in this forum and how that fits into the overall vision for the trade organization.
Okay, so a number of things. So first of all, thank you to everyone for all of the questions, and thank you, John and Nancy and Joelle. Coming up, we've got session 2 is going to be agriculture for food, energy, and agritourism in Hawaii. We have session 3 coming up, which is going to include Hawaii Gas, your company as well, Joelle, Small Enterprises and PVT Land. We're talking about waste to energy opportunities and waste to fuel opportunities as well. So how all of this comes together is we literally find ways to collaborate and work and build projects together to move towards these goals. We find ways to make sure that in concert we can advance really the bioeconomy. Everything that is done and everything that is talked about coming up in the next couple of sessions is going to include how we are going to be integrating with various aspects of ag or the construction industry, the waste to fuel opportunities and so forth. So, I mean, from that perspective, once again, so the agriculture sector is key and vital, and that's where we can end up with Bob King coming in with Pacific Biodiesel and his team. Talking about that side, and it's food production, and one of the key aspects is it's not food or fuel, it's food and fuel, and I know that Bob's going to go into that to a greater extent. So really it's how we come together with food and bring the sectors of food and energy and even tourism together, and how we can really take the opportunities that are available to us in all of the areas, and how we can make sure that we have some metrics to show really what our progress is. So that answers your question. If there's more question, I can take more questions.
Thanks, thanks, Carl. But we're actually we're doing just about right on time, and so I'd like to thank our panelists. So we're starting off this forum with the kind of the darkest days for both the fuel and the aviation industry that either industry has seen really ever. But there is some light, and the light actually it's a little bit comforting. The light is actually on the renewable and sustainable side, because those projects are continuing to move forward on the mainland, and we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the ones moving forward in Hawaii in the next couple of sessions. So I'm going to go ahead and hand back to Suzanne. We've got a couple of videos we'll be showing during this intermission, so everybody can recharge their coffee cups, and If you've got questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And if you want to see the program, then please go to www.hawaii.bioeconomy.org, and it's all up there online, including the speaker bios. So thanks very much.
Hold on one second. I don't know why we're not having any sound.
Climate change matters to all of us, and we need to care for our island home as best as we can for future generations.
Hi, thanks for bearing with us. I don't know how come there was not sound on that video.
That's okay, Suzanne. How about if you go ahead and try the second video, see if the audio works on that, and we'll plan to come back from the break at 10:10. So just stop the video if it's still running. And my apologies to Laurent and Hawaii Gas. We will, with their permission, try and put the video up on the Bioeconomy website so that folks can view it later with the audio.
Okay, I'm gonna run this one and you let me know if there's some sound. Okay.
So the new Hiva clan, that's our family line. They were in charge of the water.
I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties here.
It doesn't help us today, you know.
We're looking at the inlet to some instrumentation that is inside the plane that makes
deposition of 10,000 holes on the ground there.
We're going to have to do a lot of different things to get carbon neutral in Hawaii by 2045, but planting trees has got to be part of that solution.
My 2 pellets, one in one side, the other one on the other side, and then I continue. Okay, it's on that side, and you will see a number here. That's 60. Okay. You guys see it?
Yeah.
All right, guys, go.
You can do this in your home. You can do this in your backyard. You can do this as a church. You can, everybody can do it.
You then see transparent tissue with the white skeleton underneath, and they are not getting the nutrients that they need to survive.
What that means now is all that water they were holding back by their presence is now going to go much farther inland than it's currently projected. And that's going to translate to billions and billions of dollars of infrastructure damage. It's going to affect our quality of life. It's going to affect our economy. It's going to cascade throughout Hawaii.
So our corals that we've grown for the past year indoors, where we want to actually fast grow them, after they've been fully covered 100%, we can outplant them here in the beach, in the ocean.
The surprising answer to how is plastics connected to climate change is that plastics is connected to climate change repeatedly at every stage of its life cycle. And there's a simple reason for that. Plastics are fossil fuels in another form.
The bottles were made out of plastic, and plastic will emit methane. So that was a potential link between plastic pollution and climate change.
The desire of the consumer to have this is driving it. And when the consumer starts to drive things, then we get change.
Fossil fuels have got to go. Hey, hey! Fossil fuels have got to go.
In this way, it advantages me. Like, I don't have to spend a bunch of money on new clothes. I don't have to worry about the waste. I don't have to feel bad about it. Like, when I go to H&M and I shop, I actually kind of feel bad about it.
It's kind of sad because it's like we're throwing away a lot of stuff that could have been reused by someone.
Yeah, I see that at people's houses, and all of a sudden when they start throwing it away, I'm like, where do they get all this rubbish from? Because we just was here last time.
So for us, it's really a blessing to have these birds here because of what's happening now up in Midway. With the global warming, they're predicting that whole breeding area, where there's millions of them, is going to be underwater in a couple of years.
We should be a little bit worried about what's happening to them because eventually we may face a similar fate.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Carl, can I ask you to give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Great, thank you. So I'd like to quickly give you a quick introduction. My name is Megha Sharma. I'm currently the Vice President for IES Logistics, which is Island Energy Services. Island Energy was previously Chevron, and in 2016 became Island Energy. And as of 2018, December, Island Energy Services got out of the refining business, and we're currently completely a logistics business, which is a fuel importer, storage, and distribution business. So like Eric Wright mentioned earlier, we as well are completely fuel agnostic and are very well positioned to the forward-looking fuels business, whether it comes in the form of biofuels or renewable fuels, in whatever shape and form. So I'd like to welcome everybody back from the break. Hope you guys are all fueled up for the next session, which certainly is going to be a very, very interesting and thought-provoking session. And the discussion is going to really center around the topics of agriculture for food, energy, and agrotourism in Hawaii. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our first speaker for this session, Bob King. Bob needs no introduction. He's our He's our visionary here. His official title is the president of Pacific Biodiesel and certainly an expert in the field. So Bob, if I can turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a presentation I'm going to attempt to put on here. So let me see if I can get this to work. And are you seeing that yet or no? Okay, I need to go. Sorry. So what typically happens, I need to share my screen before I turn on my my presentation. Okay. But as Megha said, I'm Bob King, president of Pacific Biodiesel, and also a farmer with my other companies, Seymour Energy and Made in Hawaii Naturals. So today, I'd like to talk a little bit about where this vision goes with the Hawaii bioeconomy. And as we heard, you know, about 80% of our food and energy is imported into the state. And, you know, cutting off from that is catastrophic to us. But also, when you consider that 80% of our food and energy, more than 80% of our food and energy dollars are leaving the state, I think there's an opportunity to bring back thousands of good jobs to the state and create a place that's really more in sync with where Hawaii should be going. So as we know, I think the pandemic has made it a little clear that we have a couple options. We are at a turning point here. We can continue to support tourism as our major economic driver and put a lot of money into rebuilding that industry. And we can continue to import food and energy. Or we can pivot and start using agriculture to grow food and also energy. And that's the part that is exciting to me, and I'd like to keep working on this. So what are the opportunities? So you know, we can grow food and energy here. We have in the past grown a lot of food in Hawaii. By doing so, we can develop thousands of tens of thousands of jobs, because those are dollars that we're sending out of the state right now. So let's keep some of that for us. Let's make an industry that works to do this. And you know, tourism is great, and it can be a part of this, but it needs to be a part of it, not the whole thing. So we have to use tourism as the extra, not the must-have part of our economy. So what have we been doing? Pacific Biodiesel, we've been growing oil crops specifically. This is a field of camelina that we grew on Oahu. We've grown safflower, and of course, what gets a lot of attention is our sunflowers. But while we're growing oil crops for biodiesel, we also realize that, like just the same as when we try to make biodiesel correctly, we run our entire facility on renewable energy. All of our trucks are run on 100% biodiesel. We need to do the same on the farm. Obviously, 100% of our equipment runs on biodiesel. We don't use herbicides or pesticides, which significantly adds to the challenge. But we also are trying to do it with respect to our host culture, and Kimokeo here has been helping us learn the Hawaiian moon calendar, which we use for all our planting, and just have this sense of land and the islands. And you know what, when we're talking about the damage that we've caused from fossil fuel and the things that we've done that we didn't realize at the time. What we realized being out here on the land, and I'm out here a lot, is that healing the land also heals the spirit. So it's a good thing to be doing in so many ways. And I do feel like we're going to try to, if we're going to do this, let's try to pivot to a regenerative agriculture model, you know, even if it is harder, because it's the right way to do it, and we'll have something that our kids and grandkids will be proud of for a long time. So why don't we do this more? You know, we at Pacific Biodiesel, we've been making a lot of renewable energy. Our plant produces the equivalent, it's about 6 million gallons we'll make this year. We'll have our best year ever this year on production. And that translates into, say, 250 megawatt hours of electricity every day that is made from biodiesel. And that's used predominantly by the utility, and it's used on peak times when wind and PV are down. So it's a really nice fuel. It's basically the competitive part of compared to batteries. Biodiesel and batteries are the balance going forward for the grid. But we need more. You know, the 6 million gallons a year we're going to make this year is not enough. That's why we've been farming. And there's used to be that land was a problem, but that's not really the case anymore. There's a lot of land that's fallow with sugar and pineapple going out. And water is reasonably available. So really what we need is to figure out the model and how to put in these costs, because the infrastructure to grow food or fuel is significant, and we have almost none of it here. I think I have one of the few crushing mills in the island, had the first combine that came into the state. These are common pieces on the mainland. And it does, it's hard for us to get the funding we need to do these pieces, because when we talk to the USDA, you know, about, you know, can we build a crushing mill here with some help from the government? They're confused. Everybody has crushing mills for oil seeds. Everybody has tractors and combines and things, but we don't. So we're gonna have to figure out how to get this significant infrastructure cost for a brand new industry, and it's not the small 1 acre, 2 acre vegetable farm. It's not the 50,000 acre sugarcane or pineapple facility. These are in the middle, so it's new. This is a new kind of farming for Hawaii. So we need the equipment to farm with. We need processing equipment. We need packaging and marketing. And we've got to have a diverse set of products out there. So we're not going to just grow energy. It's hard to make that pay. But we can grow food. We can grow our oil to make food products, and then use anything that's not top grade. We put directly into biodiesel, and the oil that goes to restaurants we'll get back as used cooking oil to make biodiesel that way. So the economics of farming for energy, in my mind, runs squarely through high value products, food products, cosmetics. We need a significant portion of this agricultural output to go to these high value products, and then the rest of it can go into energy. And by the way, when we grow oil crops, and the plants have done a spectacular job of converting sunlight into oil. They do it for us. We just clean it up and it's biodiesel. Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that, but basically the plants have done the heavy lifting there. So But out of every BTU of fuel that we get from oil, from plants, there's probably 3 BTUs that are still in the meal and the stalks and the leaves and the rest of the biomass. So converting the rest of that material into energy is exciting, and it's it's not ready to go to scale yet, but I think we're getting really close. We're going to hear a little bit more about that later. But if we can get farming working, then we're going to create the biomass to make a lot more energy than just the oil product. And the other points I did want to make was that because Hawaii is small and we are on different islands, it's easy for us to tell what's imported and exported, of course, but it's also tough for us to get a lot of specialty markets going because we have to do it all ourselves. We can't drive it to the next state like they do on the mainland. For goodness sakes, South Dakota is the second largest sunflower oil producer in the nation, and they don't have a single crushing mill in South Dakota because Nebraska has them and North Dakota has them. So they just farm. That's all they do is farm. We're not going to have that luxury. We're going to have to do the whole thing here. We have to farm. We have to create the high value products. We have to bottle. We have to market. But all of those pieces are jobs. And those jobs are going to be immune from global economic crises because we're doing it ourselves. If it's okay this week, it's going to be okay next week if we're growing and eating, consuming our own products. So that's the exciting piece of going forward. We need to get support from the state and local governments like Iowa and Nebraska, who spend a significant part of their state income towards farming. We need to figure out how to do that, how to help farmers start a new industry. And I'm almost out of time here, but I've got a lot of ideas, and it's exciting and it's challenging at the same time. And look forward to working with as many people as possible to help coordinate and put all this together, because I'm not doing it all. I'm just trying to figure out a single path, and there's thousands and thousands of great ideas out there to make this all work. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Joy. Was I supposed to introduce you? It's all right. We're all friends here.
Oh,
Joy works for us. She'll introduce herself in the beginning, but go, Joy.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I'm Joy Galatro. I'm Marketing Director, AKA Storyteller for Pacific Biodiesel. It is an exciting time, as Bob just explained. There's such great opportunity right now around agriculture for food and energy in the state. So I thought what I could do for you today is really dive into those details a bit, share with you what we have been doing since we began farming in 2017 with these beautiful sunflowers as our crop behind me and on screen. We love telling that story. For us, it's really farming for food, then fuel. For those of you who know us at Pacific Biodiesel, we started by taking used cooking oil, a waste product from restaurants statewide, and creating clean biodiesel fuel from that. And now we're farming for food grade oils, selling it to restaurants, recycling the used cooking oil to make fuel. So it's really a full circle sustainability system that's emerged. And I'll be talking to you about that today. Talking about the challenges that we've seen along the way and some of the opportunities, surprisingly, that have emerged this year. Definitely challenges with the pandemic, but some exciting opportunities as well. So let's dive in. Yes, this year has been challenging. It actually is our 25th anniversary at Pacific Biodiesel. So you can imagine we had grand plans at the start of the year to really celebrate that. We always like to honor Earth Day for obvious reasons. And we put seeds in the ground to time our sunflower blooms around Earth Day this year. And then the pandemic happened. This was Earth Day 2020 at the farm, 35 beautiful acres in bloom, but we could not have anyone come to the farm for the farm tours this year. And that's really been exciting for us since we've been farming this particular crop since 2017, to see the impact that it's made. Our first field was about 12 acres on this site, and Bob was there on the farm every day for the full bloom, which is only about a 10-day window during this 100-day crop. And that captivated Maui. You know, residents and visitors alike were stopping on the side of the road to look at this yellow rectangle that had popped up in the middle of the valley, just enamored with these beautiful flowers. About 50,000 people, we estimate, took a look when that first farm appeared. And if you take a look on social media, on Instagram, hashtag Maui Sunflowers, you can see the incredible photography collection that has emerged from the public, just loving these flowers. That's when we realized, wow, we're not just farming for food and fuel, but we're actually supporting agritourism in the state by creating this opportunity for people to learn about what the state is farming. So as Bob mentioned, we can't just grow these beautiful sunflowers and turn it into biodiesel with the oil. We really need to create high value products, and that's exactly what we did with creating culinary oils, creating cosmetic grade oils. The culinary oils have been, you know, really successful in terms of completing that farm, a true farm to table menu here in the state for chefs. We're able to grow this local culinary product, sell it to them, and they love coming to the farm, learning about it, and talking about the story of sustainability and supporting us, because their used cooking oil from the restaurant goes to make the fuel. Many of them have shared recipes cooking with our oils, which is fantastic, because if we get endorsed by a chef, it speaks volumes on the quality of our oil and the flavor profile. And then we have our cosmetic grade oils. We actually began in the cosmetic space. It's a recycling story. We had the processors of macadamia nuts on Hawaii Island say, hey, we have these pieces of nuts. We know you guys make biodiesel fuel out of plant-based oils. Do you want them? And that created our R&D into developing these beautiful oils. And even the name is by design. Kuleana references our mission. We want to, it's our responsibility to make products that are healthy for people and planet. As Bob mentioned, our farming practices are really respectful of the land. And this year we began hemp, farming industrial hemp at our farm, creating the popular CBD full spectrum hemp extract ingredient. So our products have great story behind them. And where we've seen storytelling really come to life is on the farm tours that we do. We do not have the staff to do daily farm tours, but what we started to do when we realized there was such interest here is bring our fuel customers in to the farm. Maui Electric, many employee teams have come to the farm. Here's Maui Disposal last year at their 50th anniversary, bringing their employee teams out to really learn about their fuel partner. Where does this biodiesel come from? Why are you guys farming sunflowers now? In fact, why are you farming sunflowers is one of our #1 questions. And for us, therein lies the opportunity to tell the story in a very compelling way. Agritourism, really at its heart, is storytelling. And people connect with stories. I can tell you the groups that have come to the farm to learn about what we're doing, and we can connect those dots to let them, you know, really point to, hey, there's Maui Electric right there. They use our fuel. Oh, by the way, do you see those boats out in the ocean? They're using biodiesel fuel, a biodegradable fuel on those marine tour boats. All of the farm equipment, including this awesome red combine, runs on our biodiesel fuel. And this is what we're making with the fuel. We start to get into that story and the eyes light up, and people are so proud to learn about this Maui-based company and the products that we're doing, and the fact that it's happening. It's not some model of what might be someday. We are doing it, and this fuel has been created for 25 years now. So being able to tell the story of our products and our company through the farm tours has been tremendous. It's even given our customers an opportunity to get their own press around it. We've been on the cover of many magazines and newspaper articles, of course, social media. But when we brought out the teams from Andaz, for example, the first spa in the state to use our sunflower oil in massage and their spa treatments, they brought their spa team out. The restaurant was using the oil, same with Fairmont Keilani. They bring their employee teams to learn about us. And then you have 50 people leaving that day just, you know, telling our story for us, just so excited, endorsing us, word of mouth. Even tour companies wanted to partner with us and want to continue that. But again, I will say, after all that we've seen, we realize that the farm tour component is powerful for communicating these big ideas, these product stories, these customer stories. But unfortunately, we still had challenges in terms of getting our products really out there in the marketplace. People want to support local. They want to support local products, but they didn't have to. You know, we hear many times, yeah, you know, we like the oil. This is great. You know, you're a little more on the expensive side. Well, we can't compete. We're not the quality. We're not conventionally processing our oils. They're really premium quality, locally grown. But if people just make the decision based on cost, we're not going to be the cheapest. So we got a lot of, you know, this is great, but yeah, you know, talk to us, not a sense of urgency. And then the pandemic hit. And overnight, we had systems that were put in place to help farmers and local food producers get their products out to the marketplace that didn't exist 6 months ago, 8 months ago. Maui Hub was the first one here on Maui that created an online shopping place that was aggregating all of the local farmer products and allowing consumers to pick and choose and purchase online to make orders and then pick up once a week. So overnight, you as a consumer, and by the way, consumers were shifting their behaviors, having to stay home and cook at home and begin to do online grocery shopping. Now, all of a sudden, we had many opportunities to select local products, local farm ingredients. For us, for our culinary oils, we were the only culinary oil on the virtual shelf. So our sales with Maui Hub were so much at a higher pace than other retail locations that were carrying our products, less competition for us. But more important, the consumers were so excited to be able to purchase our products and tell others about it. FarmLink Hawaii, for example, similar to Maui Hub, they immediately brought us online when we reached out to them. And just last week, they did another order. They sold 6 cases of our oils in 2 weeks. And they did an incredible write-up about us, and consumers are talking about it. Eat Local Maui is a locavore challenge here that's developed by some passionate food advocates about sourcing ingredients locally. And we're part of that. And I will say what we've seen is a genuine enthusiasm that's emerged. Not just, yeah, let's support local, but yeah, let's support local. Various marketplaces that have emerged are being funded by state and county resources. And it's an opportunity that wasn't there a year ago. So the momentum is picking up for supporting local farm ingredients, locally produced products, and I think local in general. It's really important for us to, continue to do that. And agritourism, sorry, jumped too far ahead. Agritourism now has the potential, I think, from what we've seen on our just piece of farm tours and how it lights people up, agritourism has an opportunity to tell the bioeconomy story in a much bigger way, to connect and get more residents, not just visitors, but residents learning about what we're doing, learning about these big concepts, actually no longer concepts, these concepts are becoming a reality. So to talk more about agritourism, I'm going to hand it over to our agritourism expert, Pomai, to dig a little bit deeper into that space. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good morning, good day to everyone who's out there.
Thanks to Bob too for setting the stage for me. I'm Pomai Weigert, and I'm here representing on behalf of Go Farm Hawaii and the Hawaii Agritourism Association. I'm also gonna try to share screen. So let's get it going here. Hold on just a second. Slideshow. Okay, there we go. So today we're going to talk about agritourism and energy. When Joy and Bob asked me to be on their team, you know, I really had to really compress like what it is that I'm going to talk to you about in this really short amount of time. And you know, really, the lenses that I look through, that I work through, that I represent are agriculture, tourism, and community. So whenever I'm looking at anything business-wise, I'm looking at how those things can be integrated. And there are 4 key areas of shift and transition that have risen to the top since the pandemic. I like to, whenever I'm doing these sessions, I always like to remind people like what was before, and what is now is this new direction that we're going. There was especially in Hawaii, because we're, you know, and in business, we're looking at projection. Well, last year's projection, or last year we had this many visitors, or this is how much production we had. That is a long time ago. I mean, 8 months feels like 8 years ago at this point. So we really are at a level of building from scratch. And the 4 areas of conversation, or the conversation starters that I really feel like we need to focus on, or that I try to guide people toward when we are looking at new types of economy, are 1, the tourism scope. So I'm going to give you a really brief, like, what is the tourism sector, the tourism leaders, our largest economic driving force next to the military, and then kind of agriculture as well. Like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? What's their plan? And how that heavily affects where our dollars and where our business goes in Hawaii. The second is, how are we going to diversify our economy? Like, with what? Like, how in a time where tourism was just a huge chunk of what we were reliant on, how does that start to change? And then how does that also directly connect with multi-industry collaboration? Basically, diversified economy and multi-industry collaboration are the same coin. So how are we looking at those things together? And then lastly, community reinvestment. A lot of times when we have new ideas and we have new solutions, you know, there's a bullet on there that says community buy-in. How are we going to get the community to buy in? But also that is directly tied to community reinvestment. Like, how are we investing in that community so it makes sense that they buy in? So this is a little infographic that I have here, and I just want to kind of go through those 4 areas of discussion. On the tourism end right now, pre-pandemic, the tourism industry in Hawaii really was trying to start to brand Hawaii as somewhere where they wanted visitors that were responsible, we're thinking about sustainability, more aligned with the values and the culture of the place. You know, to be quite honest, Hawaii historically has had a very, very spoiled traveler. They come here, they can do whatever they want, they can buy whatever they want, we do whatever we want for them. And I mean, I wasn't really foreseeing that we were gonna be able to change, but that was great. We were gonna start to brand with that. Pandemic came and it leveled out the field. So kind of like Joy was saying, it's not so much we would like to be responsible, sustainable, but it's more that now we have to. Like, that is when we're looking at the sustainability of Hawaii, the kind of tourism that we had when we saw like how quickly it could be taken out, swept out from underneath our feet, when I thought it was just unstoppable. Even myself, I was like, there's no way they're gonna stop tourism here. It's too big of a monster. And that kind of, the monster was put to sleep, and now we're looking at, again, how can we build better? So the messaging from the tourism sector is really about how do we create these programs that are pono, that are that malama aina, that malama community, which means to take care or to do the right thing. The tourism industry is looking at a lot of like give back programs. How do we, you know, if visitors come to Hawaii and they engage in a farm activity or a nonprofit organization, then they are eligible for a free night. Like this is something that tourism is actively looking at, and you know, honestly, they don't have all the answers. These are things they're trying to pilot. They don't, I mean, no industry has all the answers. All we're going to hear, I suspect, for the next year is worst case scenario, best case scenario, piloting new ideas, piloting new markets. We'll see how it goes. Let's try this out. And we have to go in that trajectory if we're planning to move forward in any way. So I just want to build that overview because that leads right into how do we diversify the economy. And diversifying the economy has a lot to do with multi-industry collaboration, and that the tourism sector specifically is looking for new stories. They can't keep telling the same stories over and over again because those stories are not responsible, are not sustainable. So who do they look to? They're like, hi, knocking on the door of agriculture and wanting to put us on their race card. They're wanting, we want to talk about food production. We want to talk about sustainability. We want to talk about energy. And really in that storytelling, it's important to understand that the consumer, we did not build the consumer to care about these things. We did not build the consumer. I mean, I still to this day have people ask me like, well, why can't you give me 100 pounds of broccoli tomorrow? And I have to remind them that we have to grow it. So when you're thinking about that in regards to energy as well, like people are very disconnected by the essential resources that they need to function, that they need to move forward. And agritourism is an outlet to share those stories and to provide that education. Consumers also, they want to be smart. They want to be included. They want to be invited. And these are our opportunities to let them know that, well, you know, when we're looking at the whole picture, when we're not just looking at our own selfish selves, we are actually connected to so many different industries. So then that bumps us over to multi-industry collaboration. And really my point at this one is it's about representation. Like look at your groups, look at who your industry hangs out with. And if they're all the same people, that means you're gonna get all the same ideas and all the same solutions. So we're in a really opportunistic time right now for us to look at our team and be like, who don't we have at the table? Who else can we invite? Who do you think we could work with? And really the solutions that are gonna work are gonna be the solutions that we make work. You know, there's no fully blazed trail. There's no like map that we're all following. There's not, you know, like, oh, what's the standard? We're in a time of rebuilding new standards. And really being a part of piloting new markets, that is the kind of thinking, the innovative, resourceful thinking that we need in a lot of our business conversations in order to build more sustainable communities. And then again, just starting conversations. We don't have all the answers, like but also not coming to the table with nothing. I feel like, you know, and really engaging our communities to do that as well. Like not to just complain about what they don't have, but to show up and be like, what about if we did this? And agritourism is a really incredible opportunity for that, like Joy was saying, because it's a way for us to tell our stories. And essentially, storytelling is story selling. So it's also a way for, at the end of this education, how do I buy in? How can I support? How can I be a part of this? And then lastly, even though I was thinking about putting it firstly, is community reinvestment. Agritourism is also an incredible way to help share with not only visitors, but also to remind residents about respect and place-based protocols. And that every place, everywhere has that. And if we are going to continue to develop industry, develop travel, develop local business, it's important that people understand the economic and environmental responsibility that they have, and to start training consumers to be more empowered, be more informed. And I think historically, initially, that wasn't like consume, buy, money, which we still need economy, we still need commerce, but we don't have plenty of that. Like there's not just an overwhelming amount of things. So now we kind of have to play a little defense with where we're gonna put our investments, and that really helping people connect to a place, to a culture, and having an understanding of initiatives or things that are happening outside of our communities. How does that help our communities? And really taking those things into consideration. So I'm very grateful to have been on this panel. I know this was a really fast track to what agritourism can provide for any industry. But you can see on here, I put a little sliver of leadership in bold. That is really what it's going to take. It's really going to take leadership from all areas, all industries, all communities, in order to diversify the economy that we're looking for, and then get new stories and new messages shared with people that come here. So I'm gonna end with that. And and here's the race card, just in case. We like to thank everybody who helps us bring these messages to everyone else. Back to you.
Well, thank you so much. That was very, very informative and very inspiring presentation. Thanks, Bob, Joy, and Kumai. Appreciate all your insights and strategies and things that are currently and actively being worked on. And Joy, that beautiful picture of the sunflowers, you know, it's almost competing with the Tulip Festival in Washington State. I think we should market it like that.
Good point. Yeah,
is it easily available on Instagram? Is it something that we market, you know, about the Hawaii tourism as well as agritourism with these types of images, just like Washington State does?
Yeah, we're trying to get the word out. We actually are not yet open for general public tours. We're busy farming, but naturally our farm is in the convergence of two main roadways in the Central Valley, so people can't help but see it. And those that have stopped, which we're not encouraging people to stop along the side of the road, but those that have share on their own. We've created the hashtag, and people are tagging their images with Maui sunflowers, and you can see, you know, the incredible variety and happiness. You know, Bob spoke about how agriculture really is good for the soul, good for the spirit. These flowers are happiness creators. During the pandemic, but early on in the pandemic, for example, we were able to get, during that April timeframe, bouquets of blooms, and deliver those to healthcare workers at the hospital. There's a little bit that we can do, and you would think we're handing out bars of gold. You know, these sunflowers make people so happy. They have such a positive symbolism. So as much as we can align our company, and we try to do that in storytelling and with our partners telling our story, it's a real positive.
That's wonderful. I think there was a question earlier. Where can we find these products that you guys are currently producing in your farms?
Great question. I should put up our that page with the different new locations. You can go to our website, Made in Hawaii, MAIDEN, madeinhawaii.com, madeinhawaiinaturals.com, sorry. And we have a shop tab there where you can see all the retail locations, including some of these new online marketplaces. And if it's not at the grocery store of your choice, please ask them, why not? And please add our products.
If you don't mind sharing that in the Q&A window, that link, that would be very helpful, Joy.
Perfect, I will.
So Bob, you know, the natural evolution of fuels obviously is towards the biofuels, the renewable fuels. And, you know, some states are talking about it, people are talking about it, you're doing it. You've been doing it for, you know, almost 25 years now. So can you talk to us about some of the challenges that you face as the sole, you know, viable biodiesel producer in the state in terms of scaling operations? and what you think, in your view and in your past experience, are structural changes needed to overcome those scaling challenges?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's different in Hawaii than other places in this market. As I said, we started using used cooking oil from restaurants, and still our major feedstock. But we get it all. We get all the used cooking oil in Hawaii, all the grease trap waste in Hawaii. We're making anything that's a lipid into biodiesel, but that's only about half of our capacity at the Big Island plant. We made more capacity for ag oils, and it's a bit frustrating how slow it's been to get crops grown here for oil, for biodiesel. So that's why we decided to get into farming. And so for 5 or 8 years or something, we've been doing that. The other challenge, one of the biggest challenges though, is the short-term nature of all the incentives around biofuels. Our federal mandates are usually 1 year or 2 years long. The state mandates, the state incentives are renewed every year. So, how do you make, how do you build a refinery, build these, spend tens of millions of dollars on infrastructure and tell your investors, yeah, this is going to be good for at least 2 years. And it just doesn't build that durability into the investment model. So somehow we have to get the infrastructure on the ground. And once it's on the ground, then it's our job to make it affordable and durable and continue to work it. But it's risky. It's risky to spend the money right now in these times on a lot of these pieces. So we've got to come to terms with the risk to the producers compared to the risk to the economy and the environment.
Very, very well put, Bob. And I think that's where this collaboration of industry, government, and non-for-profit is even more, vital to an initiative like that. And this question could be for Pomai or Bob. You mentioned in your presentation how, because of the remote nature of the Hawaiian Islands, if we move further and further into the process of this circular bioeconomy, we have to do everything from scratch, right? Or actually, I would say start to finish, or cradle to grave, as we like to say. Mm-hmm. And if we do that, that's definitely a very sustainable model. But then what steps or what items have to be put in place in order to maintain the competitive edge when it comes to imported products from the mainland or from other countries, if we want to move towards that cradle to grave economy for tourism and agritourism and bio oils?
Well, I'll start, and then Pomai can jump in. There's a big investment, and you have to choose your processing. So I don't suggest we start next making Cheetos, or but we can't just keep selling potatoes. Potatoes is a low value, and we're always going to find that. So how mainland companies make money is added value. You want to make potato chips, you want to make taro chips. All that packaged food is 90% of the agriculture economy. And so we need to get our farmers in front. Obviously lettuces, and there's a lot of things that we should be eating fresh, but we've also got to select pieces that we're going to go further with and get that added value. Because if we don't pay farmers market wage, they're going to go do something else. And the young we see that so many young people that are excited about farming until they find out, oh, but then I can't afford a car and I can't afford this, I can't do that. Yeah, we have to make it affordable. This is not rocket science, the whole economic picture here, and that's where Pomai tells the story of why should we spend more for chemo to grow our food rather than somebody in on the mainland or another country.
I think that another important component is like from the farmer food system and when helping farmers like look at their business models, we recommend to them to not just put all their eggs in one basket, that they too need to diversify. So don't just get locked into a contract where you just farm these one thing. So when I look at that model, I look at that model for every industry. Like those who had put everything, bet all their chips in one place, lost all their chips in one place as well. So when we're looking at how we can, it's not just about farming fuel and farming food. It's like those things are for people. So the consumer drives the economy. Like, how do we make people understand that they need those things and want those things? And that is what we are able to do by teaming up with other industries like tourism, like energy, like agriculture. We all do touch in some way. So kind of being able to like pilot and show that, oh, well, our community, we kind of got it together. We're already talking. We're already starting those conversations. I feel like puts us in a good position to connect.
If I could make just one more point, is that as tourism adds that extra income to farms, so does energy, and we haven't made that transition yet. But energy is it's an amazing piece to get a solid income coming in. So it doesn't have to be the main income, but if you can almost make a living out of farming and then add on energy or add on agritourism, now you actually did make a living and you did pay your bills. So that's what we're trying to do, is push these pieces together to support real farmers.
It's a very good point, Paul. Thank you. Pomai, if I could have you leave us with what you think, in light of the reduction in tourism that Hawaii saw and the inevitable change of the economic drivers because of our industry so intertwined with the tourism. What would you like to leave this audience with as to the next steps for your organization, along with government, non-government, industry, to be collaborating on, say, 2021 onwards?
Ooh, that's a good one. Thank you. I would say that, from the agriculture end, I think, again, pre-pandemic, it was like buy local was a gimmick, or like something trendy, like that was something to do that you do to feel good. Like that is not a feel good thing now. That is a thing that we need to do, or our industries will not survive here. Like businesses are closing every day. So like if we as the communities who are here do not invest in that, or do not understand, or do not try to seek those answers, we are going to be left with less. So that's the one for agriculture. The one for tourism is that, again, historically pre-pandemic, it was always outside visitors that we marketed to, where there's so many people here. Like local people will come if they are invited. So when we look at an ad, if the ad doesn't look like people who are here, then maybe people that are here don't think that they should go. That, oh, that's not for them. That is for people who look like that or are from those places. We're like, in fact, no, anyone can buy from us. At this point, we are looking, and it's really funny to think that like the local market is now the new market. So kind of those paradigm shifts is the seed that I want to kind of plant as we leave here today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pomai, Bob, Joy. Very informative and almost inspiring session. And if we didn't get to all the questions, I'm sure Bob, Joy, and Pomai can answer them in the window as well. So thank you, everybody. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 11:10.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, there's some polling questions up on the screen if you can answer them. Thank you.
For years, Hawaii has sought solutions to two critical issues that affect the sustainability of our island home. The first is the need for an environmentally safe and economically feasible way to dispose of refuse, which typically goes into a landfill. The second is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and protect our environment by making greater use of clean, renewable energy resources. At the PVT recycling facility in Nanakuli, a new recycling system is helping to accomplish both objectives. The PVT landfill is the only construction and demolition landfill on Oahu and accepts only C&D debris. Trash picked up at your home doesn't come here, but when houses and buildings are torn down or built, the wood, metal, plastic, wire, concrete, and other construction and demolition debris all end up here. For years, materials like these were buried in a secure, protectively sealed landfill. But now, the majority of this debris is getting an important second life. Much of what enters the PVT facility as debris is separated, shredded, and ultimately turned into feedstock, fuel that can be burned to produce clean synthetic natural gas that can be combusted in a boiler to generate electricity for Oahu's power grid. About 60% of incoming debris can be processed into feedstock for use by bioconversion facilities and other power generators. The PVT recycling system can handle about 1,775 tons of debris a day. That much debris yields about 900 tons of feedstock, enough to produce electricity for up to 12,000 homes. PVT has made a substantial investment in equipment and added 15 new jobs to bring this new recycling system online. An excavator grabs large pieces of wood and plastic too large to pass through the system. These will be processed separately. Concrete and asphalt are separated and will be crushed and reused as cover on roads. Large pieces of metal, including specialty metals, are pulled for off-site recycling and reuse. What remains, a mixed load of construction debris, is loaded into a vibrating taper screen. Pieces of debris smaller than 6 inches in size fall through the screen onto an unders conveyor. Debris over 6 inches, which is about 60% of the total debris, continues to the overs conveyor. A magnetic separator pulls anything magnetic, hinges, nails, bolts, and other metal pieces, from the conveyor and drops them into a metals bin. A secondary taper screen separates dirt, rocks, broken glass, and other pieces of debris that are less than 1 inch in size. What is left is prime feedstock material. This debris continues on to the sorting line. Here, workers clean and separate, pulling remaining pieces of rock, metal, and other materials from the feedstock debris stream. Up to 42 tons of metals are pulled for recycling by PVT every day. Meanwhile, on the over-sorting line, a team of 10 sorts debris 6 inches and larger, pulling pieces of metal and other materials from the debris stream. These are dropped into bins below the sorting line for recycling. Debris suitable for feedstock is ground and shredded into pieces of uniform size and piled for pickup. By now, all that remains is wood, plastic, paper, cloth, and other materials suitable for bioconversion. Because Oahu's gasification facilities are still in the planning stages, the feedstock will be buried at the landfill until it can be reclaimed for use when the time comes. The environmental advantages of this system are found in the numbers. Only about 20% of construction debris entering the facility now actually goes into the landfill, an 80% reduction. 60% of materials are reclaimed and converted for use as feedstock, with an additional 20% destined for other recycling or reuse. Feedstock from PVT can reduce the amount of imported oil consumed to produce electricity on Oahu by about 200,000 barrels per year, which means roughly $20 million will remain in Hawaii's economy every year, instead of being paid to foreign oil producers. It's also worth noting that none of this has come at taxpayer expense or with the aid of government subsidies. Call it a landfill, but this is the future of smart waste management. By converting debris into feedstock for the production of electricity, we reduce our dependence on landfills and fossil fuels and enable the production of cleaner, more affordable, renewable energy where we need it most, working for the people of Hawaii.
It looks like we already had that question, so is everybody ready for the next section?
Looks like everybody's ready for one thing, though. I would like to acknowledge the presence of State Representatives Mark Nakashima and David Tarnas. Thank you both very much for joining. We appreciate your leadership and I look forward to working together as we proceed. Thank you.
Aloha everyone, and welcome to the Hawaii Bioeconomy Trade Organization Forum for October 2020. My name is Laurent Nassif, and I'm one of the HBeTO board officer, and I'm also Senior Director for Clean Energy Innovation at Hawaii Gas. Today, I'd like to talk about the role of clean energy utility and utility projects in supporting Hawaii's pandemic recovery, with a special focus on the recovery for the local economy. So a little bit more about who we are and what we do. We've been in the state of Hawaii for more than a century, since 1904, and we're the only franchise gas utility in the state of Hawaii. We have close to 340 employees and 70,000 customers, both residential and commercial. And we supply clean energy to all islands, statewide. Our mission is to safely provide Hawaii with clean energy that is sustainable, affordable, and resilient. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we produce synthetic natural gas, or SNG, locally, and it's a mixture with up to 15% hydrogen. We produce it using recycled water and what some may consider a byproduct or waste from the local refinery. We also produce renewable natural gas, or RNG, locally as well. An example would be the upgrading facility at Honolulu, which is a partnership with the city and county of Honolulu, where we use their wastewater waste. We're also the largest propane supplier in the state of Hawaii, with storage in all islands, which ensure the statewide resiliency and provide backup to the utility in case of emergency. We further utilize LNG to provide flexibility and affordability for the RNG integration into our supply. Finally, we distribute affordable, clean energy through 1,100 miles of underground utility pipeline on the island of Oahu. Now, Hawaii is our home, and the pandemic has affected everyone, including our customers. First, we saw an economic devastation with loss of jobs, loss of incomes, some sectors more deeply affected than others. But on the positive side, I believe we saw a renewed focus on local, affordable, and reliable clean energy. On the social side, the feeling of being remote, isolated, and we saw some areas that are underserved and less resilient. Of course, staying at home affected all of us. But we also saw a positive community response, where people got together and supported one another. Really, what we saw is the areas of change and the areas of focus for that change. First of all, maintaining and creating good jobs, reaching the underserved communities, focusing on local, affordable, and reliable clean energy, revitalize the local economy, improve the state's resiliency, and of course, continue the fight against climate change by decreasing greenhouse gas. Now, at Hawaii Gas, we haven't been spared either. While we've seen a continuous support from our residential customer, we also observe commercial and industrial volumes decreasing by close to 40 to 60% compared to last year. But beside this, our OANA was able to maintain statewide operations, maintain employment, continue to support our customers, and provide the same clean, affordable, and resilient energy to Hawaii. Now, the true question is, can this pandemic become a catalyst for change? What we believe at Hawaii Gas is that our clean energy plan can support Hawaii recovery by maintaining and creating good jobs, connecting the underserved communities, help revitalize the key sectors in Hawaii, continue our transformation to more utility RNG and hydrogen, continue to provide clean energy that is sustainable and affordable, and improving Hawaii resiliency. So at Hawaii Gas, we want to use our clean energy plan to support recovery from the pandemic. And we will follow 5 buckets. The first one is renewable natural gas. And we're looking at the phased integration of more RNG into our supply by extending the existing partnership, developing more waste to energy projects, and diversifying the local RNG supply. The second box is SNG and hydrogen. And we aim at the phased integration of more utility hydrogen by extending our existing partnership that allows us to have up to 15% hydrogen in our system today, developing and diversifying the hydrogen supply so we can go beyond that 15%, and of course, studying the feasibility of integrating more hydrogen into our utility system. The third bucket is liquid natural gas and propane that provides state reliability and resiliency, affordability for our customers, and more flexibility so we can integrate more renewable into our supply. Then the transmission and distribution that will help us to connect the local communities and the more remote areas, maintain and create new good jobs. The last bucket, the fifth one, has a series of programs that will help us tie all of that together. First, a greenhouse gas program looking at both inventory and life cycle analysis to help us monitor progress toward the reduction of greenhouse gas and our carbon neutrality goal. Maintaining the safe operation of clean energy assets, which have a series of different types of renewables. And finally, doing more energy efficiency and backup projects using that newly created renewable supply. The next few slides, what I'd like to do is to take you on a virtual tour of one of those win-win projects. A virtual tour of the facility at Honouliuli Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's an award-winning partnership with the City and County of Honolulu, where we support Hawaii's carbon neutrality goal by providing renewable energy to our customers. We provided payment to the City and County of Honolulu for what would be otherwise flare biogas, meaning no revenue and more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. We provided the equipment and the operation for the small footprint of the upgrading facility. We also provide affordable RNG to our utility customers. On the sustainability side, we're talking about 800,000 tons a year of renewable energy, which is around 4,300 metric tons of CO2 eliminated every year, which is less CO2 from fossil fuel sources. We use, obviously, waste, and we also use the recycled wastewater at the SNG plant. On the resiliency side, we connected the facility to our utility gas backup, which is underground pipeline. We also provide a local supply that is consistent and reliable. Now let me run you through the process. The first part is in blue, and it's the part that is handled by the City and County of Honolulu Wastewater Treatment Plant, or the digesters. They collect the water sewage, put it in a basin, put it in the fermentation, put in the digesters, and those digesters generate the biogas. Then the part from the upgrading facility where we capture that biogas that would be otherwise flared. We remove the water, we remove the CO2, remove the H2S, and add the other end so we can detect leaks. And if it meets the specification of our biomethane gas, then we inject it into our transmission and distribution system, where we provide the clean energy to our customers for cooking, eating, and fueling. Now, please follow me for a virtual tour of the Honouliuli facility. Our first stop is a water removal system, which will, well, remove water. The second stop is the activated carbon vessel, which will remove the H2S. Then we go to a compressor that will bring the gas to 100 psi so it can go into the two-stage membrane that remove the CO2. Then it will be at 60 psi and we'll still have to bring it down to 14 psi so we can inject it in our distribution line. The gas analyzers allow us to make sure the biomethane are up to specification for our transmission distribution system. If you look at the box in 6, you can see the big digesters in white in the background and the small footprint of the upgrading facility in green. The HMI, human-machine interface, is just a fancy word to say a computer that allows us to control all the various parts of this very simple process. Now that we've seen the win-win at Honouliuli, the real question is, how can we do more? So in the next couple of slides, I'd like to give you a little bit more detail on the type of projects that are part of a clean energy plan and that will support the recovery of the local economy after the pandemic. The first series of projects are carbon negative RNG local sources type of projects. First, wastewater, like Honouliuli. The advantage is that the source is predictable and consistent. We can build on the success of Honouliuli. And there is one more project that is viable, which is Sand Island Wastewater Treatment Plant on island. Those projects help us recycle local waste and capture the flare biogas, which is good for everyone. Now, the limitation is that the local resources are themselves limited and they're owned and controlled by third party. We also need to focus on the extension of the contract at Honouliuli. The second type are landfill waste. The advantage is that there is some waste in place that we want to recycle. And there is a wide array of different technologies that are available, such as gasification, digestion, or other type of separation. For digestion, for instance, we can build upon the success at Honouliuli as well and just add a few separation steps to the process. There again, we recycle local waste and what we're trying to do is really to finish what we have started years ago. We're doing that because we want to improve the recovery of the local economy. We want to improve the resiliency of the state. And we also want to be fighting climate change by reducing greenhouse gas, not just for our generation, but for the future generation. Mahalo.
Hey, Laurent. Thank you very much for a really informative overview. And I apologize to everyone who's, I guess, trying to moderate the Q&A, and I accidentally unmuted myself. So I apologize for that. What I'd like to do is build on what you were talking about, Laurent, and talk a little bit about what we're doing. Give me a moment and I'll pull up my own slides. Okay, I apologize. Let me get it on the right slide first. Okay. Very slowly. Okay, so can I get a thumbs up, or somebody let me know if the cover is showing all right? So I'm Joelle Simone-Pietri from Simone-Pietri Enterprises, LLC, and my last name is kind of difficult, and the name of the company is sort of hard to spell. So I'm announcing a rebranding of our waste to energy initiatives as Aloha Carbon. And so that should be a lot easier to both pronounce and spell for everyone. We're proudly based in Hawaii, but with a global view. We do have clients, several clients in Hawaii, also in the on the mainland, and Australia and Canada. And our DNA really is in waste to energy, waste to fuel. I also have a background in military, so about half of what we do is consulting for industrial and military clients, and the other half of what we do is new technology and new project development. So here's some examples of the kinds of things that we do. So going into the recent past, our company and I had the opportunity to work with Eric Wright at PAR and support their renewable energy and renewable fuel analyses for just under 3 years, up through March of this year, which was very valuable for us. And we were able to look at a whole bunch of different kinds of things for PAR to take a look at integrating renewables and greenhouse gas reduction all the way through their system, from the refinery on down through logistics. Also past tense, this is kind of in the way past tense, prior to my stint at the Department of Defense, but I was at Kunli Agri-Systems, and we did help with some of the business model and project development for the Kauai algae facility, which is still there today. It's now operated by a company called Global Algae Innovations. And I think it's a great agritourism site. There's not a lot of people even on Kauai who know about this facility. It's pretty low to the ground, so you can't see it from the road, but it's actually right underneath the approach path to Lihue Airport. Turning to present tense, 2 of our current clients are Kalailoa Partners in Campbell Industrial Park, and Lysella, which is based in Sydney, Australia. What we've been doing for Kalailoa Partners is a techno-economic analysis to take a look at options for them to replace the low sulfur fuel oil with a renewable or a lower greenhouse gas fuel, starting in the 2025 to 2030 timeframe, as the state of Hawaii's renewable portfolio standard starts to ramp up for electricity generation. And then on the bottom, Lysella is one of our clients in Sydney, Australia. Lysella is a leader in a group of companies that do a kind of process called hydrothermal liquefaction. Basically, they can take a wet waste, like a sewage sludge or a paper mill waste, and will actually convert it into a biocrude. And this is actually a picture of their actual demonstration plant near Sydney in New South Wales, and a great place to visit, and a really great group of folks to work with as well. Turning over to the right to the future tense, I'll start on the bottom right. We're exploring with HPower and Covanta some technologies and options to actually reuse the ash from the municipal solid waste that is combusted on Oahu for energy, because right now the ash still does have to be landfilled. And you know, we talked about kuleana earlier in this forum. I see it as my kuleana to divert waste from landfills and figure out how to be able to reuse it as much as possible and as many times as possible. It's part of the reason why we're using Aloha Carbon as a new name, because we say hello to the carbon, we say goodbye, and we like to say hello to it again, and recycle and reuse that carbon as many times as possible. And then going up to the top right with PVT land, for those of you who caught the video at the intermission, we're setting up to actually be that gasification project that's still on the drawing board and be able to take all of that buried material. Again, you know, my kuleana is to divert and remove waste from landfills. I'm really excited to play a part in reducing the amount of material that has to get trucked all the way to Nanakuli, and be able to actually turn it back into back into energy and back into useful fuel and products. So CND debris is actually not just a problem in Hawaii with some recycling options for the concrete and the metal and really not a whole lot of options for the wood. There's actually more CND debris generated on the mainland than there is municipal solid waste. And this is according to the Environmental Protection Agency. They do a study of construction and demolition debris and municipal solid waste flows about every 3 to 5 years. One of the things that makes construction demolition debris challenging is that, well, it is a waste stream, so you can see lots of different sizes and types. And there's also a fair number of contaminants, like from treated lumber, thanks to our Formosan termite problem in Hawaii, paint and glue, and those end up creating chemical challenges when it comes to converting them into energy. So it's difficult to reuse, certainly as a mulch or a compost. It also can sometimes make it difficult to just combust like in an H-power type situation. But the nice thing about gasification as a technology is that you're actually able to take a lot of those contaminants and either convert them into energy or safely sequester them so that they don't end up getting emitted into the air. So, Jim and Nancy from Airlines for America talked at the beginning of this forum about the CORSIA, so the growth, the goal for carbon neutral growth in international aviation starting in 2021. And this is something that I and my company have been involved in for over 10 years now, and something that we're personally and professionally very motivated to try and accomplish. So putting those together, what we're working on is to basically take the wood and plastic waste from PVT land, take it to Campbell Industrial Park, put it in a gasifier in a way that's integrated and works with both Par Hawaii and Hawaii Gas's refineries, and then be able to get it to the end users in a form that doesn't require any infrastructure change once it's actually completed as a finished fuel. So drilling down a little bit more detail, PVT Land's landfill in Nanakuli is actually it's a national good news story as a very well-run facility, great safety record, very good environmental record, but it is very close to residential areas in Nanakuli. And so that's why I'm trying to actually size the gasification plant so that we can take at least half of the material that they have available that has an energy content and be able to take it out of Nanakuli and back to Campbell Industrial Park and be able to turn it into energy there. So another exciting thing that I have to announce is that we've actually completed our greenhouse gas analysis for that exact process. So taking construction and demolition debris from Nanakuli, taking it to Campbell Industrial Park, and converting it into a renewable hydrogen through a proprietary process that we're developing with a couple of partners. The greenhouse gas life cycle is, I actually had to kind of artificially increase the bar here because it's near zero. It's 2.3 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule, which ends up actually being better than even hydrogen made by renewable electrolysis from pyrolysis. And the real opportunity for Hawaii and for CND as a novel feedstock to make fuel out of is this difference between petroleum and natural gas, the carbon intensity of those, and being able to get it all the way down to 250 grams of carbon dioxide per megajoule. So specifically the Hawaii project, our analysis was done by a global certification firm called SCS Global. They've been approved by the United Nations for CORSIA accreditation. And by their calculations, this one project on Oahu is the equivalent of planting 70,000 to 165,000 acres of forest per year. Not individual trees, that's actually acres. So it kind of gives you an idea of the scale of what we can do with good, innovative waste to energy conversion, and how much of a positive impact is possible. So another couple of announcements. We are just getting started with the feasibility study. So this is a little bit more than PowerPoint deep. We've got a fair amount of techno-economic analysis behind us, and the initial scoping engineering is complete. We've now contracted with both the Gas Technology Institute and Foster Wheeler, which is now owned by the Wood Group, to be performing the initial engineering analysis for us in order to get a better estimate of what the capital costs of a plant like this will be. And we're looking at basically having the Hawaii project make renewable hydrogen, potentially also renewable natural gas as well. So we're starting those conversations with Laurent at Hawaii Gas and with Eric at PAR. But I don't want to tie their hands at all. It's still early stage, and we need to get some fairly expensive technical work and engineering done before we can really start to say that this is definitely going to be a go. So as an example of how this fits in, we talked earlier in the forum about how the sustainable aviation fuel projects are proceeding despite COVID, and the renewable diesel projects that a lot of those are in conjunction with are proceeding as scheduled and continuing as well. What's exciting for us is that all of those plants and all of those projects do need hydrogen. And currently, the default is that they crack that hydrogen from natural gas. And so this potentially is an opportunity for the kind of integrated system that we're developing to meet Hawaii's needs might actually be able to be applied elsewhere. So as another example of how the market is moving on the mainland, COVID has not actually slowed down. Here's what I'm showing here is California's low carbon fuel standard. So this is the value of a ton of carbon that's actually sequestered or removed through a transportation fuel. And the carbon credit value has actually doubled during the pandemic. It was what we thought was an all-time high at $100 a ton back in 2017, but now it's actually trading, and these are market-based measures. So these are market trades. This is not a government mandate or a carbon tax. The market is actually pricing the value at over $200 a ton. So our project in Hawaii isn't going to have any bearing whatsoever on the California market, but the technology that we develop here certainly could. So to kind of sum up, how can we actually make this goodness reality? The first thing is that these are complex and integrated system projects. They're not easy to do. They take years. We're talking 3 to 7 years, and they're very complicated. They require lots of parties. They require lots of integrated systems. And so I think a way that we could potentially use COVID from the challenge that it is into an opportunity is maybe take a look at some of the CARES Act funds that just aren't going to be able to be executed by the time the federal government considers them expired on December 31st, and perhaps figure out a way, perhaps through like the Hawaii Technology Development Center, to get them into the Manufacturing Expansion Partnership program, to be able to get it out to small businesses and the businesses in the bioeconomy, like like Bob's and PBTs and some of the others that we've mentioned here, to actually be able to execute it. With those funds, we would be able to hire a wide variety of skill sets and people, and really be able to actually accelerate some of the project development and technology development needed to make some of this waste reuse a reality. The second area where we could use help is advocacy support. Hawaii, unfortunately, has a lot of examples of, good to great ideas that just are no longer happening. So it's not just Super Ferry, it's not just Huhonua, it's not just Energia, but Hawaii doesn't have a dairy anymore. The last dairy closed. Hawaii doesn't have sugar anymore. Now there are pros and cons to those, but it's really easy to kind of throw stones and point fingers at the complicated and new projects that are trying to come online. And what I ask is that we also think about what the opportunity cost is. What's the cost of not improving our sustainability? What's the cost of continuing business as usual in the same way that we've been doing it all along, which got us into, not so great performance on those metrics that Carl was showing you back at the beginning. And the last two items is that we could use some help with facilitation for environmental permitting. The Hawaii State Energy Office built a great permitting wizard that made it very easy for photovoltaic and wind developers to at least figure out how to plan their projects. Photovoltaic permitting for ground-mounted solar and for rooftop solar went from an average of 6 to 9 months to get permits. For photovoltaic, actually now is under 72 hours. And so there's a lot of room for improvement for bioeconomy projects as well. And finally, maybe consider some market-based measures. I don't think, Hawaii taking on something like the low carbon fuel standard en masse is really a small state, but we can, take a look at something similar to the state of Oregon's, which they literally have a reciprocity agreement with the state of California. So there might be a way for Hawaii to opt into California's standards so that projects in Hawaii would be able to monetize some of the value of the greenhouse gas reductions in markets larger than just Hawaii's. So that's, here's my contact information if anybody wants to reach me, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, and we'll start the discussion now with our other colleague, whose video you saw earlier, Steve Joseph and Laurent. So Carl, I'll hand it over to you to start off the moderated Q&A.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And thanks to Steve and thanks to Laurent as well. So a few questions to start off with. So with the projects that are out there, what do you think is the role of waste to energy projects as far as the pandemic recovery is concerned?
Yeah, if I could take that one, if that's okay, and maybe if I can get to finish a few of the descriptions that we didn't get to see because they were describing some of the projects. If that's okay with you. I think, what I was going through is a few of those projects, which I think, would really help us, with the recovery from COVID and the pandemic. And the first type of project we're going through were very similar to Honolulu. They were basically based on wastewater treatment plants. And a great advantage there, is that it's a consistent source. And the limitation is that, well, the sources on the island are limited, and they're also controlled by a third party. The other type of RNG projects, which are also waste to renewable energy projects, was based on landfills. And what we were seeing is that basically there is a wide range, a wide array of technologies that are available for this type of projects. And there again, the limitation is that they're basically limited sources in island and also controlled by third party. The third piece of this type of renewable natural gas project, which are carbon negative projects, was using agricultural crops, which really benefit in the fact that obviously we're using plants, and plants do the heavy lifting, which is what Bob was saying earlier. And those are very scalable projects, and they really benefit the farmers because they provide them additional revenues that can revitalize the agricultural sector in Hawaii, and also attract new generation into agriculture by having this new technology type of application for agriculture. But the limitations there are that land is relatively scarce in our islands, as you probably understand. And of course, we need to build this partnership, with the farmers to kind of like have that that relationship. And we can also leverage for some of these some type of crops that really fit very nicely, with their current farming practices. So there is not too much disruption with respect to what they do with farming using the fallow lands. The other set of projects I want to go through were infrastructure projects. And I think those are very important for the pandemic recovery, because projects like underground pipeline expansion, they will allow us to basically connect those local communities that we found were more remote and underserved under the COVID and the pandemic conditions. And that would also connect those local communities that are more remote to local sources of renewable energy. So that will create also a lot of employment and good jobs. The issue there, or the limitation there, is that these may require some large upfront capital investment. The other type of projects on the infrastructure side are basically energy backup type of projects for our critical facilities, or energy efficiency type of projects. And there again, those are like, job creating type of projects, which I think are very important right now. And the third one, which is a topic on its own, is hydrogen and hydrogen-based technologies. The video we didn't get to see actually was covering some of that. And I know for some people that have attended the hydrogen day, they've been able to have a flavor of that. But those projects are very, very key to us when we go beyond the carbon neutrality goal and start looking toward the carbonization of the utility. And their new technology type of employments, well-paying employments for local folks, and obviously a large amount of benefit to the environment by using basically zero carbon type of fuel. So sorry for having to go through these projects. It's a long introduction to the answer to your question, but I think it was important to go through that, because really what we're talking about today is we're looking at a series of solutions from various organizations with respect to the recovery for the pandemic. And really the focus is around employment. Basically, there was so much loss of jobs and everything that went with that for everyone, that all of the solutions are trying to create good jobs which are well paying above the minimum wage and a longer term type of jobs. So if you look at things like renewable natural gas or the infrastructure projects, you're talking about a job in operation and maintenance of those facilities, which are longer term, well-paying jobs. If you're looking at using agricultural crops, then those are jobs that basically would revitalize the agriculture in Hawaii and provide new revenues to the farming communities and the local farmers, and attract the new generation into those jobs. And then, of course, you have jobs related to manufacturing and construction, for all of those type of projects. So really, that's I think the role of all of those projects that we've seen into the pandemic recovery.
Thank you, Laurent. So Joelle and Steve, to go off of some of what Joelle was talking about, what are some of the barriers and challenges that you have encountered, as well as that you foresee in the future And whether it's process or policy, what sorts of changes can you request or even recommend?
Steve, how about if you go first?
Yeah, well, the permitting is probably the biggest problem that we have right now. It took us, we had to run on a generator for 1.5 years waiting for an electrical permit. So, I mean, I go along, we don't get a lot of support in any of the areas for any of these projects, not like that we really need. And, you know, they're all high cost, high capital investment in these. We have $4.5 million in our recycling facility alone. But we're the biggest recycler on the island, about 184,000 tons last year. And when Joel's project comes on, would be about 235,000 tons a year, which is a sizable amount of recycling for the island. But the best part of it is that it's like, you know, energy that is being shipped into us with all the wood that comes in. Because primarily what we're talking about is wood. That's the big one for it. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I would say, because we're at different stages, you know, so kind of where I and my company end up being is in the first of kind of something. You know, we were there for the first of kind ever for, you know, an algae to jet fuel facility, and the first of kind ever for the first SAF facility, and capital raising is very time consuming. I'm not very good at it. I really don't like it. It would be so much, you know, probably when I was back in my 20s, it would have come a lot more easily. And so, you know, and I know, you know, folks tend to hear that a lot, but it is a significant amount of capital. For example, to complete the feasibility study, it's going to be about $5 million. And that's for something that is very innovative. You know, there is no other reference plant in the world that is gasifying construction and demolition debris. There's no place we could tour. There aren't designs that could come off the shelf. So we're having part of our innovations is we're basically starting with coal gasification. I'm not talking about actually gasifying coal in Hawaii, but you know, the U.S. government put a lot of money into that technology thanks to some of the other states that are actually in coal country. And I think it's kind of neat that we're going to get to build on that and adapt it for a renewable fuel technology. So, capital raising, then once the money's raised, permitting is the next big hurdle. You know, Laurent's project at Hawaii Gas, it was a 20-foot container to go in next to an existing wastewater treatment plant. And it took nearly 3 years to get the permit to put that in, just to add a 20-foot container onto an existing facility. Do we really, you know, as a society, do we really want to have to wait that long to be able to actually do some of these simple sustainability projects? The sustainability projects, though, they're hard, they're complicated, they're expensive. And especially when you come to Hawaii, the third problem is a combination of technical and a combination of market. It's scale. A lot of things that can be done fairly easily on the mainland, like all those renewable diesel projects that I showed, you can't do them in Hawaii. In Hawaii, our population isn't large enough. We don't deep fry enough food to feed a renewable diesel plant. Bob will pick up everything that is economically recoverable to be able to make 5-6 million gallons a year out of it. And the same thing goes with technology. I spend a lot of time scouting around the globe for things that actually can get smaller, you know, or modular in order to be able to fit in Hawaii's economy.
And if I can jump, would that be okay? You know, piggyback on what Joel said, you know, I think they're hitting the nail in the head here. You know, there's a few things. You know, the first thing is that resources are limited in our island, and it is a challenge to be able to have access to those resources. And so we need support in that sense, right? Everyone that knows me knows that I'm very much a fact-based person, and trying to get the facts, trying to get the information is also something that I believe we need to do if we want to mature those projects and find new projects. I mean, a great example of that is in our mission to decarbonize and include more hydrogen into our utility. We're trying to build we've been building those strategic relationship with partners across the globe, and to be able to study and figure out how we can increase the amount of hydrogen into our utility system, and answer those questions on the distribution, on the end user side, and on the supply side. The third piece that Steve mentioned is obviously the elephant in the room, which is the regulatory and permitting setting that we have. It's complex, and it takes time, and it can become a deterrent to some developers for projects which are win-win for everyone in the island. So I think, you know, if we could find ways to simplify those processes and make them a little bit faster, so we don't have to wait years to get some of those projects that would reduce greenhouse gas, will be good for the island, will create employment, will be good for resiliency and reliability, all of that, and affordability for our customers. I mean, I think that would be really a great help. So that's what I would say, you know, the key challenges are.
Thank you both. There was one other question that was raised with regards to trash that has already been, or waste that has already been buried. What opportunities are there to dig in and pull that out for use as well? And we can have this be the closeout comment, as we are now beyond 12 o'clock. So maybe Steve, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've been recycling for years, so we've been separating. And so we have a couple of cells in the landfill. It's about 750,000 tons of wood already separated. All we have to do is go in and recover it back out again. So I think we've already taken the steps 4 or 5 years ago to start banking a lot of wood, because part of the problem is when you go to get financing for any of the projects that we're talking about, whoever's financing wants to know you have some bankable material, that you have a supply that if suddenly COVID or something else hits, a hurricane, can you still produce material out to turn it into fuels? And realizing that, we started on this project a long time ago. Matter of fact, we're recycling right now in the old landfill about 4 million cubic yards of material that we're actually in the process of recycling, in addition to the 750,000 tons of wood we already have banked. So I think the answer to that is, yeah, there's a big banked supply already.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you to all of the panelists, and thank you to everyone involved and all of our participants. I think there's opportunity for some people to stay on a little bit longer. Some of us have to jump off right now. I also want to make one comment that one of our collaborators, Hawaii Farmers Union United, is also having their 10th annual convention coming up in the middle of November. You can find out more information about that at their website, hfuuhi.org. But otherwise, truly appreciate everybody involved in this. Every time we have a forum, there's a lot of information shared. One of the most important steps is, what do we do from here now? So it's incumbent on all of us to now take this information and take these projects and see how we can help advance and how we can move forward these ideas. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you to Suzanne, our behind the scenes moderator, and thank you to our event intern, Jason Reed Kadian, who actually helped put together the online program at the 11th hour last night. So thank you, Jason. Suzanne is going to try and queue up a kind of an exit poll, and so we can get feedback from those attendees who are able to stay on just a little bit longer. Thank you. Hi there. I spoke while Noelani fried and burnt a lunch, ran the ice maker. Solana ran the microwave. I'm done speaking.